You guys tell me.
Yep, I can see it.
All right, great. Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and thanks for working with us to get this rescheduled. We had originally scheduled it for January. So today is it's the third in our series of family engagement webinars for the Wyoming Family Engagement Project. And for those of you that may not know me, my name is Lacey Wood. I'm with American Institutes for Research. I work out of Austin, Texas, and I've been involved in family engagement work for about 16 or 17 years now. Most of you guys have worked with me and know me. If there are some folks who are on the webinar that are interested more in my work, you can feel free to email me or we can send you some information. I do want to let you know that all of the participants have been muted for the webinar. So if you've got a question or if you want to respond, we do have some questions embedded in the webinar. Feel free to unmute your line or type that information into the chat box. So today, our webinar on supporting student success, we've got two objectives. We are going to be identifying characteristics of family engagement that support student success. And then we're also going to explore strategies for linking family engagement activities to learning. And so just as a reminder, kind of the way we've got these set up is first we kind of talk about the characteristics, we talk about what the research says, what we're learning, and then we talk about some different strategies, and then I'll finish up with ideas for implementation. So just to remind you all of a couple of resources. So this work is housed within the Wyoming Project WIN, or the Wyoming Instructional Network, and we have that URL up for you. And then, let's move that. And then we have the Wyoming Family Engagement Project and the web address for that. And that's where you can find the archives for these meetings and links to future webinars and other resources. So many of you guys are familiar with these. A lot of this is just a reminder that we have all kinds of good information up there and to continue to check back on those resources. Okay. Okay, so starting off, so that you guys just remember, we framed this work for the Wyoming Family Engagement Project and these webinars along the National PTA Standards for Family School Partnerships. There are a lot of standards out there that support different family engagement approaches. A number of different groups have developed frameworks and other standards. They're all actually very similar to each other. These concepts don't change, and what the research tells us it doesn't change. But we found that this national PTA standards were especially helpful in organizing this work and framing the webinars. Okay, so just a reminder of what those standards are. These are the 6 standards. The first one is on welcoming all families into the school. The second is on communicating effectively. The third that we're tackling today is supporting student success. Our next webinar, that'll just be a little bit later this month, is on speaking up for every child. Then we'll do one on sharing power and one on collaborating with community. And then there is a 7th webinar it's focused around using data, but it's not particularly tied to any one of these standards. Okay, so just as a reminder, there are all kinds of terrific resources related to these standards that were developed by the National PTA, and this shows that web address. and how the standards fit together. Okay, so with that, I'm going to kick off on the content, and to make sure everything is going well and start talking about what our goals are and our characteristics for that work. And then I will pause at certain times to ask for some questions and ask you guys to reflect on the information. And so I'm going to give you a couple of opportunities. I'm going to put the questions up on a slide and have you guys think about it. And then I'm going to continue presenting and come back to the questions and then provide you guys time to unmute your lines and speak up. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we know, and I've talked to many of you a number of times around effective family engagement, but there are a number of characteristics of effective family engagement that are very focused on supporting student success, or a lot of what we call in this field as linked to learning. And so this is really kind of bringing us back home. Why are we doing this work? Why are we doing the hard work of partnering with families and communities? And ultimately, it is often to improve student outcomes or student achievement. Often, you know, there's sometimes when we're looking at some broader school-based or district-based outcomes or community-based outcomes, but kind of really where the rubber meets that road is in student achievement and student outcomes. And in order for family engagement to be effective in increasing those outcomes, we really need to be very deliberate about what we're doing and how we're linking those engagement opportunities to learning. So we're thinking about effective family engagement. That's family engagement that emphasizes this shared responsibility for student learning. So it's not just the responsibility of the school, not just the responsibility of the student, and it's not just the responsibility of the family, but a shared responsibility. It provides seamless and continuous support for student learning. So as you are starting your family engagement activities and moving forward, making sure that you're always trying to support student learning. It's connecting learning both at school and at home and within the community. So all of the places that a student learns. It encourages multiple pathways to support student learning, and so that comes back to that bullet right before that. Not only is it in different places, in different venues, but there are often, you know, different ways to get at how to support student learning. It fosters a supportive culture in working with families and communities, so you know, really trying to support all of the stakeholders involved to play their part in that shared responsibility. It creates opportunities and processes to foster advocacy. It emphasizes quality education and learning opportunities for all students. And you know, when you know, a lot of what we're talking about now is not only a quality education, but a well-rounded education. And a lot of that's built into the Every Student Succeeds Act, that we're not just focusing on core academic subjects anymore, but we're supporting the child well-being and a well-rounded education, and family engagement can be a huge support for that. Like I mentioned, we share ownership for student success. And those are just some of the main points around effective family engagement when it's linked to student success and learning. So just for you guys to think about while I'm talking, how do parents and teachers in your school communicate about student progress? What are the things that happen, you know, between teachers and parents around student progress? How often does it happen, and are there specific opportunities that you build for those discussions? And does your school use test results and other data to inform parents about skills that need strengthening? So when you're talking to parents about their child's academic progress, are you using data and test results to really inform parents about where their child is in relation to other students in the school? So just think about those questions, and I'm going to keep moving forward. So when we're talking about supporting student success, this is one where both families and schools are continuously collaborating to support student learning, but not only student learning, but healthy development, and that's both at home and at school. And you'll notice that this is about having regular opportunities to help build their knowledge and skills. And that's building the knowledge and skills of families so that they can help their children. But we know that this is hard work, and there's also a lot of work to do to build the knowledge and skills of teachers and school staff and how to best work with families around their student academic progress. So when looking at this standard from the National PTA, there really are two goals. One is sharing information about student progress. So how do you share information with families? And the second is about supporting learning through engaging families. So how are schools bolstering their activities with students by engaging families to make and strengthen that learning? Okay, so we're going to start with that first goal of sharing information about student progress. And really want you to think about, do families know and understand how well their children are doing in school? And not only how well their child is doing, but how well the entire school is progressing. And when thinking about that, there are certain things we know we need to do. So we really need to focus on data. And we know data can help stakeholders understand where the schools are doing well, where improvement is needed, and it provides direction for solutions and actions to strengthen that work. Also, programs in schools that use data to engage families in improving individual student progress see a lot of success. So being very deliberate and thinking about how you use data with families and how you use that to help families assess how their students are doing and identify areas for work and ways that they can help are things that you want to focus on. Like I said, data can help families understand how their students are performing and where those gaps are, and the data can be used to guide parents and families to take those appropriate actions to support the success of their child. And we want to do this because really when families have access to data, they're able to do a number of things. They're able to support, but not only support, but monitor their child and their students' progress and help facilitate their child as their child is working to achieve higher or tackle different subjects in school. It really is informative in helping to support transitions. And this is so that, transitions from elementary to middle or middle to high, if parents come equipped with that data on how their child has been doing, areas that their child needs extra support, areas that children excel, having that data and being able to communicate about it to the new teachers in that transition time is really key. It helps them have informed conversations with their students about planning for post-secondary, either careers or college, and it helps families really to connect their students' skills and interests to other programs that can help support learning, and that can be about choosing after-school programs or summer activities or summer programs, but really helping inform families about areas where their student is very engaged or about areas that can use additional support, and then making informed decisions about extracurricular activities that can support that. But when we're talking about sharing data with families, it's really important to remind ourselves of three things. And these three things that we've got on the slide. One, when you're giving data, sharing data with families, you need to make sure that it's meaningful. So if you're just giving them a bunch of numbers or charts, and you're not connecting that information to what that means for their lives or for their child's lives, then you've really got a missed opportunity. So one thing to think about is making that information meaningful to the families. Two, and this is really key, is you have to make the data understandable. Looking at data is really intimidating. A lot of people don't have experience with it, so there are a lot of training opportunities here, both with teachers and with parents, and how to look at data and understand data, and those can be kind of co-training, co-capacity building opportunities. And then third, we want to make sure that you've got that meaningful data, you've got the data that families are able to understand, but if it's not something they can use to take action, then why did they go through all of this? Why did they take the time? So you need to make sure that the data is actionable and it provides real information on how to develop solutions to help the child improve achievement, or, this could be school-based data on how to identify areas of weakness for the school and bring families in as partners and decision makers to help support that school improvement work. Okay, so we're coming back to our questions for reflection on this first goal. So regarding those questions for reflection, one, how do parents and teachers in your school communicate currently about student progress? And two, does your school use test results and other data to inform parents about skills that need strengthening? So with that, I would encourage you to unmute your lines and possibly put something in the chat box and see if you've got a response here. I'm going to pause for a minute. Anyone want to take a stab, talk about this a little bit? Okay, I'm going to keep moving for the sake of time, but I do want you guys to think about this and reflect on it, and we'll have other opportunities later on for you guys to chime in. Okay, so, here we've got someone. So we've got this comment that they use the goal-setting sheets to share data with parents. So that's terrific that you're using those goal-setting sheets to share back that information with parents. Thank you. So we can maybe talk a little bit later about how often that occurs. Thank you for that. Okay. We're going to move on to goal 2 and ways to support learning by engaging families. And in thinking about this, we want to keep in mind that all families can be active participants in their children's learning, both at home and at school. And so we know that different families, different parents are going to have varying levels of comfort in their ability to help their child and support their child's academic progress. But we know that from the research and what we've seen across the country, that even the parents that feel the most ill-equipped to help their child often find ways to support their students' learning. And, these can be families that didn't finish school themselves, or, they're trying to tackle a subject such as math or science where they never felt very confident in their abilities. But we know that these families can do things. It can be as simple as parental expectations and aspirations for their child, and how families consistently let their student know that they have these expectations, academic expectations and post-secondary expectations. It can be as simple as, monitoring homework or providing, that expectation that the homework gets done every day, that there's a safe and quiet place, well-lit place for the student to do the homework. And then there are ways that schools can really help these families understand how to support their students. And that can be through tip sheets and resource guides. So, I would say even probably the families and parents that are most intimidated by this and don't think they can help their child learn, they can. There are always ways for them to do that, even if it's just them expressing interest in the children's projects and their learnings and asking about that every day after school and helping to keep the child on task. That can have a great impact. So when we're supporting learning by engaging families, this is really about creating intentional connections to student learning. And that's key here. You know, often we're engaging families already. We're bringing them in as volunteers. We're doing family fun nights. You guys have got them. You've got them coming to either the school or the district or a place in the community already to either learn about community resources or different school announcements. But the key is really using those opportunities and intentionally building in strategies that connect to student learning while you're there with those families. And so part of that is using these opportunities to help families understand what is expected of their children in school and in the classroom. And these can be, you know, quarterly goals, semester goals, year-long goals. It can be understanding of different curriculum that's happening in the classroom. It's really key to provide families with information they need and how to understand it. And this is coming back to the data. Parents need to understand what's happening in the classroom. They need to understand different standards that are being covered in the classroom. They need to know about the data on their child's progress. But all of that isn't going to do you any good unless you help the families learn how to interpret that information. This is another great relationship building activity for school staff and families to really focus in on helping families understand that information and identify areas for help. And letting families know exactly what they can do to support their child. And so this comes back to, you know, encouraging your teams to link student learning to events and activities that are already taking place, and then using data to help focus discussion on the specific kinds of support that that should be encouraged. And so, in thinking about where that support is happening, is it happening in the classroom, is it happening at the home, or the larger community? Okay, I'm going to move here and begin to talk about strategies. So those are just some concepts, some best practices, what the research is telling us, and then we're going to shift now to talk about strategies and what this can look like. Okay, and then here's some other questions for you to think about as I am talking. More questions for reflection. So, do families and school staff really share in the responsibility for student learning? Are families active participants in their child's learning, both at home and at school? And do families and school staff share ownership for student success? And this gets back to that partnership piece and that power differential. So, you know, you're going to have much better luck if families feel like they're equal partners in this work, and that their work in helping to support the education of their child is just as important as all the great work that you guys are doing at the schools. Okay, so when we're designing family engagement opportunities to focus on learning and achievement, this is again about being intentional, but I think it's really important to include parents on committees. So when you're building committies to talk about you know, standards, when you're talking about raising achievement across the school or strengthening your school or your district and helping to raise your school up in that school improvement status, it's really important for you to include parents and families on the committees that are working on that and finding ways to enact policy or decisions to strengthen the school. But not only that, it's really, it's key as you're developing these intentional connections, as you're developing family engagement activities that are linked to learning. I know that you guys as school and district staff can do a terrific job of that on your own, but it's really important to actually involve families in the planning of those events. So by involving families, you're going to be able to really hone in on and focus on what's going to be most meaningful to them, what's going to engage them the most. You're going to be able to address more barriers to participation. So I would encourage all of you, as you're planning these events, to have family members that are active planners and also kind of share the responsibility for the event itself. When you're doing your family learning nights, to provide an overview of student learning expectations, not only what those expectations are, but how you are assessing the student and how families can help with that. When you're really talking specifically about what's happening in the classroom, think about offering workshops to inform families about those expectations and really to break that out by grade level. So workshops about what's happening in the classroom in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and different areas that you can leverage for that family engagement. And so when you're providing training for parents, we're not just talking about what they can do at that moment in time to support different classroom activities, but we're also talking generally about working with parents on strengthening how they can work with their students to strengthen study skills, or ways that they can really work with the teacher and with their student on post-secondary planning. And then, like I mentioned before, when you're sharing data with parents, it's really important to have workshops and training on how to understand and interpret that data. We're thinking about opportunities for ongoing engagement. So we really want to think about, as you're planning your year-long family engagement activities, how can you consistently focus on student success and link activities to learning throughout the year? And that can be done through events like we've been talking about, family nights, parent trainings, different events where families are coming in anyway, but you're linking it to learning. Families are coming in for student performances and different things like that, and ways that you can use each of those opportunities, perhaps even around sporting events, to provide information about what's going on in the classroom. But, other ways to do it are really to think about working with families on their student goals, and not only goals for the year on reaching academic goals, but also goals for post-secondary activities, college and career. But another way is to really encourage parents to take an active role in reviewing student portfolios. So if you guys are implementing a student portfolio process and that child is creating a portfolio of their work and their progress, and the teachers are going in and assessing that work within the portfolio, providing scores, a discussion for parents, ways where that is coming home on a regular basis to parents, and they're reviewing that work, and then it's providing a communication mechanism for the parent, between the parent and the teacher, that's very focused on that work that they're seeing right there. And here, is other ways to engage families in an ongoing way about decision-making specific to their child is through the individual plans of study, and very, very similar to what we're seeing in the special ed environment, but individual plans of study for all students, in middle school and high school students. And those are, ways that you can continuously engage families around that learning by having a process where the teacher is checking in regularly with the family on progress for those IPSs. And then when you are developing family school compacts, and we know that this is language that is in the Title I legislation, the Parent School Compact, and it's part of one of those things that often gets developed and put in a file and never looked at again, and is kind of that check box for compliance around family engagement. But we really want to promote a different process with that and think about developing family school compacts that are explicitly focused on student achievement. and there's some different resources out there that can really help with this and processes. But there's also a focus on doing grade level compacts. So the 6th grade compact would be developed with 6th grade teachers and a group of parents that are coming in to develop it together, and they are focusing very intentionally on student academic progress for the 6th graders, and then they're using that as kind of a focus for dialogue and ongoing communication about what's going on in the classroom. This is just a reminder that some of these things that we're doing annually just to meet that compliance need are things that can be strengthened a great deal in creating dialogue and an avenue for schools and parents to really work together. We are also looking at using data to focus discussions on very specific types of support for learning. Okay, so I was just looking in the chat box, and there was a question about strategy team work to get parents to school so that they can form them. So we all know that one of the hardest things to do is to get those parents in. So you guys can have the best set of strategies and intentions, but if you can't get the parents to come to the party, we've got a problem. So I think, that's what I was saying before. There are different ways to do that, and thinking about ways to kind of sneak this academic focus or very intentional link to learning focus in. So if you've already got parents coming to, like I mentioned, student performances, or maybe you guys do a fair in the spring, or some different kinds of fun activities that are happening already at your school, then you can have a table in the corner that's providing resources to parents around things that are happening in the classroom, or you can have a brief presentation at the beginning that's focused on standards and expectations. But this is really about, using that hook that got the parent there, which, often isn't them coming to learn about how to help their child with homework. That doesn't sound very exciting, but it is exciting to come learn and see your child, perform, or to really have a lot of activities that are focused on student presentation of projects. So science projects, history projects, different projects like that. You can kind of create much like a science fair, but it can be around any type of project where students are exhibiting their work, and we're using that to get the families in. And once students are exhibiting the work, you can really talk to the families about how teachers assess that work. One idea that a lot of people use is they give rubrics to parents and just to show them scoring criteria. This is how the teachers score this kind of project, and let the parent reflect on that, and then you can even have activities where parents, along with their students, are looking at that scoring criteria together. Other things that are helping to get parents in the door, one is not to focus so much on getting them into the school building, but meeting them where they are, and maybe that's a church, maybe it's a community center. Another is doing things at different times so that parents that are working or have hard schedules, that you're meeting them at times where they can really participate. And finally, a lot of it comes from how they are invited to these events. And so, if a student is inviting their parent, the parent is more likely to come. So that's where it kind of comes down to integrating student work and projects. So the student says to their parents, we've got this thing on Wednesday night, and I'm going to do a short report on my history project. Will you come? It's hard to turn that down. So focusing really on ways that the student is engaged in this also, and the student is inviting the parents, and they are going through this event together. 2 is using other family members from the community to do the invitations. So, and using them to provide testimonials to other parents about why it's important, and building kind of that networked community of parents. So a lot of times, if they're not going to listen to school or district staff, they're likely to listen to their peers. And the key here is finding a peer from some of those harder to reach parents. So if you have a group of parents that's just never making it to the school, can you somehow get a connection to that community and find a parent leader to work with you and help with the goal of getting more parents to these events? So moving on, when we're talking about family engagement that's linked to learning, one of the most important pieces, and I touched on this earlier, is family engagement at home. And so we see from the research that often the things that families and parents do at home can have the greatest impact on student success and student outcomes. So, and like I mentioned before, this can be very much for families that don't even feel like they can help their child. So there are a couple of things here. One, they need to have the confidence that they are able to help their child or their student. And 2, they need to really understand how they can do that at home. So really having your school staff work with these families on, 1, understanding what they can do at home to help their child, and 2, understanding that whatever level of support they're providing is good, and really having them have confidence in their ability to do that. And a lot of places provide classes for parents and families on how to help their child at home, and we've seen a lot of great results from those classes. 1, because they're learning those specific strategies, but 2, because they're working with other family members who are also building their confidence at the same time. So they feel like they're part of a group, they're learning together, they're not the only one that doesn't feel like they know how to do this. So that's around building this information to help them understand what they can do. And really, we know, like we all have very busy lives, the more you can boil that down into tips and actionable suggestions is really helpful. And this can be not only just flyers that go home with the families, but it can also be signs at the school, information in your school newsletter. You guys could do, letters to the editor in your newspapers. There are different ways that you can really connect this work. And then again, like I said, providing those trainings and classes, even if it's only on how to improve study skills at home, that can make a huge difference. Okay, moving forward, other strategies is thinking about the community. So what's going on in the community that you can connect at school? Are there community events that are happening? Is there some kind of cultural event, state fair? Is there some kind of, theater event within the community? Some different events related to the calendar, even if it's just Halloween or something like that. So whatever's happening within the community, if the school or district can build on that and provide information to families around that work and how it might connect to what's going on in the classroom, that can be really helpful. So, if this is about agriculture or 4-H, or, in Texas we have the livestock show and rodeos, which I'm sure you guys have similar things in Wyoming, and there's a lot of going to look at the animals and things like that. How can you build little mini lessons in there that families can take to that event and help kind of bolster learning standards, learning activities with their child while they're doing that? And then, providing a directory of community resources and activities to families. And this includes summer programs, after-school programs, nature hikes in the area, different things like that. I think a lot of times we think that that's so obvious. Those opportunities are out there, but we all know that these families are really busy, and they don't have time often to kind of go out and search for everything that's available, and the more you can help provide those resources is really helpful. So, getting even more intentional, how can we create opportunities for families to regularly interact with schoolwork? And so think about designing homework assignments and projects that require students to regularly share what they're learning. So built-in progress, built-in projects that build in, on Monday night, you're going to go talk to your family about, about X. On Tuesday or Monday night, you're going to go talk to your family about Spain and England and kind of that imperial period. And then Tuesday, you're going to go talk about the ships and the Navy. And, Wednesday, you're going to share with them your idea for, what could have happened within history. These are just loose examples, but something like that's an ongoing homework assignment that requires the child to talk with their parents, a couple of times a week around what they're doing and share that information, and then be able to kind of check that off or show that interaction happened with the parents. And in thinking about this, this is really getting at building these interactive homework assignments. And the key here is for that not to be, one special project that happens at the end of the semester, but thinking ongoing, how can these interactive homework assignments happen on a regular basis? When we're looking at interactive homework and we look at the research, what we find is that this interactive homework really builds students' confidence because they're sharing their work and ideas with their family members, and they're doing it at home first before they bring it into the classroom and share with their peers and the teacher. So that's really providing this confidence-building activity for the student. It's, of course, encouraging parents and children to talk about schoolwork. It's helping families know what's happening in the classroom, and it begins to provide that focus for communication between parents and teachers, and really facilitates that. So if you guys have certain parents that you just have really, there's a lot of difficulty getting them to talk with you or finding some common ground to talk about, some of these homework activities can really bridge that divide. Sometimes it's easier to talk about, science or, growing tomatoes than it is to talk about behavioral issues or academic issues in the classroom. And so while you want to get to those harder conversations with families, some of these project-based and interactive homework-based activities can provide that easy in and provide an easy way to start opening up those conversations with families. Okay. So coming back to the questions for reflection, do you really think that you are sharing responsibility for student learning? Do you feel like families are active participants? And do you feel like you guys are really sharing ownership? And these are high goals to set. So I think that it's not easy work. It's not easy work to build these partnerships, but there's a continuum there. And I think that as if you can be working to move the needle along that continuum where there really is this shared ownership and a feeling of community around helping the children in the school succeed, then that's really where you need to get. I'll just pause to see if anyone has comments on these questions. Okay. So here is where, I think we've talked, broadly about strategies and characteristics, but I really wanted to just kind of get in there and talk about, what does this look like when you're implementing some of this? And so I'm just gonna move forward and provide some different ideas. So I talked about this a little bit earlier around getting the parents in, but regularly try to hold exhibitions of student work and student progress. And when you're doing that, ask the students explain and present what they learned from that project or assignment, and then show parents how to assess the quality of their work. And so that can be through, providing parents that grading criteria or that rubric I was talking about, and so they can really see and put themselves in the teacher's shoes. This is what Jane did on this project, and this is how the teachers and in the classroom they assessed her work and graded her. I, as a parent, can try to do that myself and see if I came to the same conclusion. It really just puts them in the teacher's shoes and helps them understand where teachers are coming from. I think what's really key is to invite parents to observe in class and learn how teachers set up the classroom for learning. And one way to do that is to kind of focus really on classroom visits, especially at the start of the school year. You kind of have your check out the classroom days for families, and they can come and check out the classroom. You have these very specific days identified early in the year. And then for parents that aren't able to come during the day, find opportunities where you can demonstrate lessons at curriculum nights or book fairs or Saturday academies. But when you have parents visiting in the classroom, a couple of things, that you want to think about, you make sure you're doing, that you're very deliberately showing how the classroom is set up to encourage learning, and that can help families understand how to even set up a child's individual space for homework. You can spend some time explaining the different learning centers in the classroom, different billboards or study nooks or this book area. It's always important to be demonstrating a lesson when those parents are in the classroom and providing them that scoring guide I was talking about so that they can look at the standards that the teacher is teaching to and think about kind of what that scoring guide would be when the child's implementing that lesson. And then provide ways that parents can use what they've learned back home. So ideally, you're demonstrating a lesson in the classroom, you're talking about the scoring criteria around the standards, and then you're also sending something home with parents that are tips related to this series of lessons and what they can do at home. So if it's a science class, maybe this is about cooking in the kitchen, or it's about growing things in the backyard, or if it's math, it can be about counting and doing things at home. But I think that's key. One, the parents understand how the classroom's set up. Two, they are understanding how these lessons are working and how they're scored. And three, they can understand how they can support it at home. The interactive learning homework assignments, like I talked about, is something I'd encourage you all to really look into and to send home learning kits each week along with a folder of graded student work. So weekly, think about, interactive learning assignment coming home and then, the grades from the previous week, all with areas for teachers and parents to comment back and forth with each other and opportunities for students to share. When you're doing things that are making, like say you're making improvements to the school grounds, maybe you're planting a community garden or planting trees, don't lose that opportunity to engage both students and families. It might sound like a very logistical, gardening service, but I think there's real opportunities there. So connect it with the science teachers and what's happening in the classrooms, how the students research the plants and have resources and tips, and then bring the parents in for that actual activity where students can kind of present on what they found in their research, and parents can be involved in the activity of improving the school grounds. Consider creating a school-wide reading club with goals for the school. How many books for the school, how many books per grade level, how many books are read by students versus teachers versus parents, and then ask the students to help calculate how many books would need to be read by all those groups to meet that goal, and have students kind of track that progress on some kind of, bookometer or something like that. But this is about getting them engaged, getting them excited, and it's something that they can do with their parents. So if a student is reading a book, depending on the grade level, either they're reading it with their parents, or maybe there's companion reading for parents for students in the older grades. Think about things like that. So when you're thinking about, like I mentioned before, your fun family nights or, school fairs or things like that, how can you build in academic components? So, for instance, you could have student projects and activities around students building things like kites, and then, at the same time have students present on information about aerodynamics or how to construct the kites, and then, also have parents and teachers assess that work together. Again, throughout, anytime you're having meetings with parents or events, the more you can focus on showcasing that student work and inviting the students to talk about that work is really key. And I think that's just something, instead of, having your bulletin boards up that's, spring bulletin boards with spring flowers and spring themes, instead having that bulletin board full of student work that's showcased, and then when you have the parents in the building, or to get the parents in the building, really to focus on showcasing that work and students presenting on that work. One way that we really talk about getting families engaged in student academics is through the parent-teacher conferences, and I know you guys all do that, but I think something to think about is how do you ramp that up? How do you add more value? How do you really get the families to show up? And how do you get them to be engaged? And, the student-led family conferences where the students are discussing their work and assessing its quality is a really strong strategy. And many of you guys may be doing that already, and if you are, I'd say to continue to try to build that up and focus on it. We see that even happening successfully even in elementary schools, so at all grade levels. But one, it gets families to come to the table. So if the student is leading the conference, the student is presenting, the family is a lot more likely to show up. In ways that you can support this, this isn't the easiest thing to do, so creating a manual for really how teachers and students should prepare for these things is important. Thinking about how to address barriers to attendance. How can you provide transportation? How can you maybe hold these somewhere that's easier for the families to attend? What can you do to really increase the comfort level of the families within these conferences? Because we all know they're intimidating. You guys think they're intimidating for you, but they're way more intimidating for the families. And then when you're doing these student-led conferences, use a two-part format. So part one, where the student is the presenter, they're presenting on their work, they're making comments about their assessment of their own work and its quality. And then in part two, where the teachers are sharing the grades, the test score information, and having a dialogue with parents about that work. Other things to think about is kind of, if you don't have a family center, an area dedicated to information for families, resources, books, but also a big, strong focus on post-secondary education or careers, and resources for families, student aid, student financial aid, how to get into college, how to apply, what to look at. All those things are really important areas, and you could have an entire deep strategy across the school year that's just focused on post-secondary, both with middle and high school. There's a ton to unpack there. And I think, when you're thinking about post-secondary, really creating fun events that are tied to potential colleges or universities or careers, so fun events on different types of careers, events where kids wear colors or mascots or sporting clothes from different universities, just trying to get them interested in that university and college environment early. That's really important. I think, you know, some more things just to think about is anytime you're preparing newsletter articles or things like that, to make sure you always add in components, you know, questions for the parents to ask their children regarding certain curriculum, where they are in progress in reaching school goals, articles that might be based on student research that connects with what's happening in your community, but really having regular features that describe interesting approaches that teachers are using in the classroom, or providing data on school progress and meeting its goals is key, so that parents are always getting used to thinking about where the school is, what's happening in their child's classroom, and how they can help. And I think, you know, besides that, ways to create a kind of a state of the school report. So you could provide a report that goes out to families, or you can hold an event that goes out to families on the state of the school. But the key there is opening up that two-way discussion. So not only would it just be a report, but it'd be what happens next. How can you, an invitation to parents to come in and work with the school on reaching its goals and strengthening outcomes, but ways that you're really using that to present areas and inviting parents to come in and do strategic planning with you. And then just like I've mentioned, as you're holding these family nights or family events, really kind of create a formula each time for what that would do. Sorry about that. For what that would do. So explaining the skills, you know, take the time to, one, explain the skills students are learning in class, two, to demonstrate learning activities, three, to provide materials each family can take home with instructions on how to use them, and then have kind of a larger lending library of books and materials that parents can check out and use. And so these are just some of the things that I think kind of unpack what that looks like as these things are being implemented. And then I did collect a number of resources, like I had on the other webinars, that I just wanted to kind of walk you through quickly. So this Cooking with Data, it really talks about using article around using data with families to target gaps. Here's another one on making data work. Another article on different ways to link family engagement practices to learning, and a couple of other articles around improving your family engagement through data. Here's one on early language and literacy, some research-based strategies. And then these last two, I really wanted to highlight the Parent Toolkit from NBC News and Education Nation is a great toolkit. I see you going. There's a great toolkit there. It provides tips by grade level. So it provides tips for parents and schools by grade level, and tips that are focused on, one, academics, two, health and well-being, and some other pieces, mental and behavioral health. It's really a terrific toolkit. So I will fix this. I don't know how this got in there, but it's http://www.parenttoolkit.com without this briefing paper piece that was at the end of that. And then this article on making the most of school family compacts, and that's that intentional academic-focused compact process that I mentioned to you earlier in the webinar. And then a number of videos I included, one on Link to Learning, a couple of those, one on student-led conferences, goal setting through parent-teacher conferences, and some how families can contribute to classroom learning. So I encourage you guys all to check out these resources and videos to supplement some of the strategies that we talked about today. And I think that's really key for you to be able to go in deep and see kind of how different people are implementing these strategies across the country. So with that, I wanted to see if anybody has any questions before we go into our next part of the webinar. Okay, as a reminder, this is my contact information, and you can reach me there. And then I think Kirsten will be reaching out regarding the webinar evaluation. Kirsten, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, thanks, Lacey. Participants will be receiving a link for the evaluation. So if you all could just take a couple minutes once you get that to fill it out, it really helps us when planning future webinars. And thank you, Lacey, for that great presentation. We are going to go ahead and move into our pilot piece of the webinar. So for anybody who is on the line that is not part of one of our 3 pilot groups, if you could just feel free to sign off at this point. We'll just be moving into that part of today's webinar. We'll just give that a couple minutes.